Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
The news from Ukraine is, well, this sounds good, actually. Ukrainian forces shot down 26 out of 28 attack drones launched overnight by Russia. Let's go to Joseph Lindsley. Joe, did you have a disturbing night? How was it there where you are?
Well, Bob, good afternoon from LVIV here in western Ukraine. Many air alarms, but it was peaceful and quiet here the past 24 hours. But not long after we spoke yesterday, the Russians did begin to attack several places around Ukraine, including with the Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. But the big story is what happened yesterday afternoon in Kharkiv city. It shook people there. The Russians attacked. It seems really for the first time they attacked Kharkiv city with gliding bombs. These are bombs that are deployed from aircraft that were flying over the Russian Federation. So out of the range of Ukrainian any air defense that they have there in that region. And the bombs can cause significant destruction over a large territory. And so they hit many residential buildings, there's like sort of suburban districts of Kharkiv that consist of many of those Soviet-era buildings. And so many people live there. And there was significant destruction, homes destroyed, walls ripped off, even playgrounds destroyed. And this has, Kharkiv has seen so much destruction since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion, often with more precise missile attacks. The thing with the glide bombs is that they're less precise, and so it's very clear that in sort of this new phase that the Russians are intent on doing what they can to destroy that city. And keep in mind that many people in the city still have rolling blackouts because of that intense attack last week when the Russians sent 15 missiles that very precisely, unfortunately, hit the electrical substations throughout the city. So we see a very targeted campaign to try to destroy this city, and we don't even have to make suppositions about it. Yesterday on Russian television, a member of the Russian parliament, Andriy Lugovoy, he called for a humanitarian disaster in Kharkiv. He said, according to the translation, he said, Kharkiv needs to be cut off from electricity such that it becomes unviable, so that the 800,000 people who are still there get into their cars and head west, and then we will do the same to other cities. And I think if anyone has started to wonder about Russia's motives or forget about Russia's intentions, listen to those words, look at what was done yesterday in Kharkiv and what's been going on, especially these past few days, and you can see, what is the goal of Russia? What is a city without its people? And their only goal to destroy, and that certainly seems to be what it is. I get chills hearing that idea. And how could this be stopped in this case? How could Kharkiv be protected? Well, they would need Patriot missile systems from the United States. A limited number of those have been sent to Ukraine, but they're largely used to protect Kyiv, and then others they can move around as needed. But there's not significant resources to protect a place like Kharkiv. The Germans could help with their Taurus missiles, but they still refuse to do so. Again, citing that term, they're afraid of the possibility of escalation. And F-16 fighter jets could intercept, or could target the planes that are sending these bombs to a city like Kharkiv. And there is really, despite all the talk and the training, Ukrainians are being trained in the UK, and then soon the French are going to sort of take up some of the aspect of training Ukrainian fighter pilots. So that is happening, but there really seems no clear prospect of when the F-16s would arrive here. And notably, Denmark has just agreed to a deal with Argentina to sell them 24 fighter jets. Interestingly, last fall, the United States also made a deal with Argentina on F-16s. So Argentina's getting F-16s, but not Ukraine.
Unbelievable to hear a call for a humanitarian disaster. Wow. Email.
It's awful, man.
It's terrible. Yeah. One of our listeners has a question for you, Joseph. Recently, Joe talked about the Storm Shadow missiles Ukraine received from the UK. He said the UK gave them permission to use them however they wish with no restrictions. Is that true? I had read that the UK said they could only be used in Ukraine's sovereign territory and not inside Russia. What's the answer, Joe?
Well, the UK was very explicit that they could be used on anywhere in Ukrainian sovereign territory, which would include Crimea, which the Russians have occupied since 2014. But in last summer, the UK did, before David Cameron was defense minister, the Ministry of Defense they've been more cryptic about it, but they said, we're giving you these tools, you can use them as you wish. I will pull up the direct quote for tomorrow, but I remember that very clearly, that the UK did send a clear signal. They weren't trying to poke the Russians in the eye, but they're making it clear Ukrainians can use them as they need to. But I'm sure that a lot of that is done in consultation, with the UK before they use them. And so far, we've only seen them used on positions in the Crimean Peninsula, and the Ukrainians have been able to target a lot of significant Russian military infrastructure there. But the approach from the UK is very, very different from the approach of Germany and the United States. And again, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He said, I think it was yesterday, he said, as head of government, I must accept my responsibility in matters of war and peace. And that also applies to the Taurus, these long-range missiles. And he says, we will do everything we can to prevent the war from escalating. And so that seems to be, that's the rhetorical focus from Germany. The White House tends to be quieter about it. But as we've seen in that Financial Times story last week, behind the scenes, the White House does discourage attacks even on Ukrainian sovereign territory. But it's a good occasion to mention that while the Russians have increased their attacks on Kharkiv, the past 2 weeks there have been sustained attacks by these pro-Ukrainian Russians, the Freedom for Russia Legion. That's still continuing. So that Russian city, the closest Russian city to Kharkiv, Belgorod, from which the Russians often attack Kharkiv, they're feeling the war now. And so we can see why. I mean, this is probably part of the reason why the Russians see an opportunity to increase attacks on Kharkiv, because there are bombings and shellings, even in civilian places, as the Freedom for Russia Legion tries to hit Russian military targets. This is now happening in that Russian city of Belgorod. So really, outside in sovereign Russian territory, 2 weeks there has been. They're living in a war zone, which is something new to the Russians these past 2 years.
President Putin dismissed the idea that Russia could attack NATO, but he warned that any F-16 fighters given to Ukraine by its Western allies would be legitimate targets for Russian forces. I know you take with a grain of salt any news that comes out of Moscow, but what do you think about that statement, Joseph?
Well, and this, as President Macron of France reminded the world a few weeks ago, Putin said similar things before the United States sent the HIMARS, the long-range missile systems, in summer of 2022. He had similar warnings. If you send these, it's a red line. We're going to go crazy and we'll destroy them all. And we might do worse things. And those were sent. They changed the course of the war. Before they arrived, one Ukrainian city was falling every week into Russian hands. And now it's, now when we hear a city falling, it's big news. It happens, every few months maybe. And so you could say, this is just a continuation of, every time Putin says don't do this and the world does it, then, for example, don't attack anything in the Crimean Peninsula. And Ukrainians have not only hit the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, but they've hit a significant number of ships. So this is, as Garry Kasparov, the Russian dissident, says, it's not a chess game, it's a poker game, a game of bluffing, and who will call the bluff. So, but there is a concern that with the F-16s, and I'm going to do some research and talk with F-16 pilots, Americans, in the coming days. But, it's prime American technology, so they don't want it to fall into enemy hands. So that is part of the concern. And I don't know. So the question is, what's the point of having them if they go to Argentina and not to the place where people are fighting for freedom?
Exactly. Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. We look forward to our chat tomorrow. Thank you, Joe, as always.
Until tomorrow. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що сказав?
Well, which side are you on? На чиїй ти стороні? Come on now. Oh, which side are you on? На чиїй ти стороні?
Єбать.